I think running has really taught me that there's more to exercise than you can still push your limits. Like, I never thought I'd be able to run an ultra marathon ever. Like I said, I've gone from hating running and I'm like, oh my gosh, I did an ultra. But it wasn't to get a set time. It was just to I just had a great day in Madeira in the mountains with my friends.
Brilliant.
And I never thought sport could be like that.
Today's guest started in psychology, moved into dementia research, then swapped the lab coat for a physio table. Today she's at the sharp end of endurance running and recovery, even though once upon a time she hated running. From netball courts to neuroscience labs, from NHS rotations to building her own business. She's wrestled with guilt, discovered new passions, and learned that sometimes the bravest move an athlete can make is to rest. Welcome to the podcast, Sophie.
Thank you for having me. That's a great intro.
Thank you. Yeah, it takes a little bit of time working out. But let's start at the beginning. Before endurance sports was even on your mind, private clinics, your path has taken quite a few turns. You began with a psychology degree, master's in clinical neuroscience, and even worked in dementia research. Can you share that early stage of your journey and what that was like?
Yeah, so I was the classic like going into sixth form. I knew that I wanted to help people and I originally wanted to do medicine. But at that time I was swimming to quite a high level and playing netball to quite a high level, and sport was like my life. So I dropped chemistry, which meant that I couldn't do medicine. So I'd always had a special interest in the brain, and I thought I wanted to be a neurologist basically. So I was like, well, what else can I do? So I did what everyone else who doesn't know what they're doing does, which is psychology. And yeah, so I studied psychology at uni, decided I didn't want to be a clinical psychologist, still thought I wanted to do medicine. But I was like, I need to make sure that I want to go down this neuro route, which is why I did the clinical neuroscience masters, which I loved. It was like fascinating. I love the brain. And essentially, my supervisor for my master's was like, well, if you want to do medicine and you want to do neuroscience, like you have to do like a master's and a PhD. You have to do a PhD essentially. So you might as well just come and work for me for a bit whilst you like figure yourself out. So yeah, I started working in dementia research, in frontotemporal dementia, which is a really rare form of dementia. So that was kind of a really, like you said, quite roundabout route to start with. And I knew I enjoyed it, but I knew it wasn't right. And then it was like, do I want to do medicine and kind of go down that route and or not? And I spent a lot of time. I was working at Queen Square in London, which is like the National Hospital for kind of neurology and neurosciences, and spent some time with the neurophysios. And I was like, this is more me, because I think in medicine, neuroscience is quite a lot of, giving people like life-changing diagnoses, often that are not changeable. Like, it's kind of more dealing with symptoms. And whereas the physios were helping people cope with the diagnosis and, continue their lives, which I was like, that's way more me. So I embarked on my second master's, which was my physio degree. And I swore I was never going to be an MSK physio. I was like, nope, never. That's not me. And I'm now an MSK physio. So my family find that hilarious.
But then this is where like life can turn and things. And
Mm.
where do you think then there was that sort of burning desire to be a physio once you had seen the physios in there? Or did you, obviously you knew wasn't quite right what you were doing, but
Mm.
you were sort of maybe floating through to see what might be the next thing that resonates with you a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that was it. It's so hard, isn't it? Because it's amazing that we have so much choice in life, but trying to find your niche, I think, is really hard because there's almost too much choice. And as I said, I've always, I think one of my big qualities is I'm a caring person, and I've always enjoyed helping people, and I knew I wanted to help people from a medical perspective. It was just how that transpired essentially. And I just loved seeing the neurophysios, these guys that had, like a stroke or often very rare brain conditions, hence why they were at Queen Square, and teaching them how to walk again and talk again. Well, maybe not talk again, that would be speech and language, but walk again and function again. And I just thought that was amazing, and yeah, drove me to change career path again.
And then obviously MSK, for people listening that they don't understand what that is.
So musculoskeletal physio. So I oh, sorry.
And then you went into NHS with that in your early years and rotated through different specialties to find that you ended up at MSK, or you knew you wanted to do
Yeah.
that?
No, I still thought I wanted to do neuroscience. So yeah, be a neurophysio. And so you do rotations, well, you do placements when you're a student. And then when you come out of uni, you kind of get this choice. So either you do your junior rotations in within the NHS system, or if you want to go, a lot of people just go straight into musculoskeletal physio. And because I didn't know I still didn't know what I wanted to do, I went into my junior rotations, which actually my first one was in neurosciences, inpatients, which I loved. The only downside was it happened during COVID, but I was really fortunate in that I had been in that rotation for a while and I knew the team and I was comfortable in my work. And because I was in a specialty area, I didn't get redeployed. So it was dealing with COVID on a ward that I was already quite comfortable in. So, as good as that situation was, it was pretty good compared to some of my friends. Yeah, and then got I was thinking about, because obviously I was older, so a lot of the junior physios are straight out of uni, whereas I'd had quite a few years. A band six musculoskeletal rotation came up. So you can have your general rotations as a band five. You can also then have general rotations as a six, or you can specialize. And I really wanted to do major trauma. So where I live in Oxford, our hospital is a major trauma center, because major trauma basically brings all of the disciplines of physio together. So musculoskeletal, neuro, because we get all the spinal cord injuries, and then cardiorespiratory. So I was like, this is for me. um, yeah, that's why I kind of started to go down the MSK path.
Nice. And what sort of experiences have really stuck with you all the way through your sort of career to sort of today, would you say, from those early days that were there?
I just, I think how important rotations are. And there's this kind of debate in the physio world of like, whether you should do rotations or not, because also now physio isn't so it used to be funded by the NHS, so everyone kind of, you didn't have to work in the NHS, but it was, you kind of felt like you should, which it's not anymore. So I think the biggest thing for me was working there, because I you learn so much about everything. You're a bit of a jack of all trades, but I think that's been so pinnacle for me going forward in my career, because I know lots, I know a little about a lot, I guess. And as a musculoskeletal physio, you do have to know, quite a lot about a lot, because you get people that come in, they might be coming in with a knee issue, but they've got all these other comorbidities. So, like for me, I think that was so important, and just understanding the hospital system, and we all get free healthcare. So I just felt like it was really important to, you know, give back to that system, because it helps me, it helps my family. So yeah, I think that was a really, really big, and I have lots of really fond, like, as tricky as it was with COVID and everything, and obviously I left in the end, but I have loads of fond memories from my time there.
Of so actually those will play in life in general, that you're able to communicate to perhaps Mrs. Jones at 75 years old.
100%. And I think it also makes you appreciate life. Like, I I think a lot of people, unless you've had a family member who's been very unwell, or which is, obviously a horrendous experience anyway. I've always, so without go, it's a whole other thing, but my father has lots of medical conditions, so I've like grown up in the hospital. So for me, it's a very safe space, and and I think it just makes you appreciate life more. Like, especially in major trauma, these are a lot of the time normal people who have just had a horrendous accident that could happen to anyone. You do really go home like, gosh, I'm really lucky to be walking around and, functioning. So I think it's a really humbling, it was a very humbling experience. And yeah, like you said, you learn to work with everyone. We had criminals that came in that were cuffed to policemen, and we had to work out how on earth I was going to get him into a wheelchair. So yeah, all people of all walks of life. And I think that's for anyone who works in, within healthcare, like your interpersonal skills are probably the most important thing about your job. So yeah, for me it was great.
Of course, career ladders, by the sounds of it, are never neat. And there's always some big moments, and we have some sort of steps sideways, as you've already mentioned slightly, by not being in the NHS anymore, taking risks and even rethinking what matters. But one of the biggest milestones was probably for you was helping with We Run and as the lead therapist there. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and how you're supporting some of the athletes there?
Yeah, so essentially I decided to leave the NHS because I just with that, burnt out, tired, didn't know where my career was going type thing. And so I decided me and my husband decided to take a break and go traveling with our dog in our van. We built a van in COVID. We did that cliche thing, built a van in COVID, went traveling. And I knew that for me, I was like, I'm gonna have to exercise, and the only exercise I'm gonna be able to do is walking and running. So I got a running coach called a guy called Lewis Robling, who basically the year after he was planning on doing there's a company called Ultra X that put on ultra marathons, 250K ultra marathons, and he was planning on doing all five in a year to raise money for a charity called Big Moose, um, who are an unbelievable mental health charity who give free therapy to anyone. So you could contact them today and get access to free therapy. Basically, so I got to know Lewis because he was my coach, and his last um his last event, the fifth one, got cancelled. It was supposed to be in Mexico, got cancelled, and he was like, well, what am I going to do? So him and Renee McGregor, who is also a pinnacle part of my career journey, they were supposed to both do it, and they decided to create this event called Why We Run. Um, and Lou was basically like, "We need a physio. Do you want to come?" And I was like, I've never worked in ultra marathons before, but yeah, sure. So went to that. It was compared to what it is now, like we look back and laugh, like it was in November near kind of Bristol way in the middle of nowhere. It was freezing cold. I was treating people with an osteopath in like an open wooden shack. The guys were camping. The tents got flooded. Like but it was this amazing experience where everyone really came together. It wasn't about winning or times, and that just opened my eyes to this whole new crazy sport, but also just, yeah, seeing people pushing themselves for other people, right? Like, for a cause bigger than themselves. Whereas, swimming and netball, I was trying to get a PB or I was trying to win. So it was, yeah. And I just got hooked into trail running at that point.
And there's quite a tough entry point to get into trail running at sort of ultra levels anyway. You can't just think, today I fancy running 250 kilometers. There's a little bit of background needed to it.
Yeah.
So that's quite an interesting thing, and probably some interesting injuries that you might not have always seen, perhaps, with the ultras.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing with it is, I guess, where my career's kind of now gone into relative energy deficiency in sport. So when I was watching all these people run these crazy distances, I was like, how are these people healthy? Like this, how are their bodies coping? And so Rini was one of with Lewis running it, and she is a sports dietitian by trade, but is kind of one of the specialists in relative energy deficiency in sport, and has a virtual clinic with herself and other dietitians and nutritionists. And we just really connected at Why We Run. And the more I then started working in trail running and endurance running, I was like, this is a huge problem. What's going on? And we really connected. And then she asked me to be their physio. So yeah, so I'm now the physio for that team, which is amazing. And that has just now, that with the issues of running on social media, um, yeah, it's really pushed me into this kind of specialty of not only, like, I would class myself as an MSK physio, as a running specialist physio, but also as a REDS specialist physio, which is so not where I thought I would be. But yeah, like you said, that I've kind of gone down slides and up ladders, and now I'm here. Yeah.
Dare I say, it's then a thirst to understand and think, right, okay, here's this, these are my skill sets. And it comes back to your understanding of probably wanting to go into medicine and just helping people. You're now finding a different vehicle to help people. And what's the sort of the partnership that you have with the virtual clinics? How does that sort of work, and sort of some of the people you might see there?
Yeah, so it varies quite a lot. So I have a clinic that I'm based out of in Oxford called the Bosworth Clinic. So I see anyone and everyone. I do tend to see a lot of runners now, but I still see, you know, all different kinds of people. And then, so with Rini, we have something called the Fusion Clinic. So it's a clinic with her and myself. So if we get athletes who think they might be in reds or have a stress fracture and we feel like there would actually be benefit of speaking to both of us at the same time. We have that. And then I will see people individually virtually, which works really well. I also now see people virtually through my social media page. They book in with me. And I've actually just announced, which is really exciting, I'm, as you can tell, I'm passionate about Reds, and I really want to improve not only the awareness of it because it's very poorly understood, but also like physiotherapy management of it again because it's a new condition. There's not many guidelines, so I'm going to be doing a clinic at the moment twice a month with a team called the Running Room in London to kind of help drive that side of things. So fingers in many pies.
And I think you have to be. When you're in this world, there's lots of, it is never in silos. There's always a connection, or like a spider's web, that this strand will connect to this, and you've got to understand this bit to help this, and there's symptoms and causes, or cause and effect. So we have to understand quite a lot of that, which I'd imagine is probably what's quite interesting, is you don't just bring, you say, your physio knowledge and expertise into it, but you can also tap into your foundations of your psychology and your neuroscience as well, of talking to people. And do you think some of those early studyings has actually helped you work and better understand athletes a little bit more and their behavior, or even some of the setbacks or recovery they may or may not have?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, especially when it comes to reds, like I probably, for individuals who have, stress fractures, I'm still helping with their rehabilitation from their injury. But there's a huge, one of the biggest things that they struggle with is exercise dependency and that loss of what happens when you're injured. So, psychology plays a huge part in that. So I think as physios, and you probably get this as a sports therapist, there's a lot of psychology involved in managing clients with an injury. But with Reds, like I said, there's this overarching kind of exercise dependency that has resulted in them developing Reds. So yeah, like again, everything I've done in the past definitely all helps with my journey now and helps yeah, manage people now.
And you spoke earlier on about leaving the NHS. How did you sort of deal with that and work through some of the tension and some of the perhaps differences that your new path was perhaps pulling you to, and your old path probably wasn't quite able to satisfy that quest for learning and helping?
Yeah, I mean, I think anyone who leaves, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think a lot of people when you leave the NHS, there's quite a lot of guilt because I was helping all of these people and, like making meaningful differences. Like I would come home and be like, gosh, yeah, like that's really awesome. Or, as physios, you're the people that get them up and going home. So so I really struggled with that to start with, and was like, am I being selfish because the NHS is in the state that it is, and I'm just another number of another person leaving. I'm part of that statistic. And I think when I first started doing MSK, I was a bit, again, it's like I struggled with that feeling of like making a difference because obviously you're still making a difference. You're helping people recover from injuries, but it's not like you're helping people survive and get home. So that was really hard, but definitely recently as my career has changed, and as much as social media pains me with my social media page, and like being able to, the messages I get from people who are like, I'd never even heard of this before and I'd never even considered it, or I'd gone to my GP and I'd been dismissed. I had someone message me saying I felt like I was being like medically gaslit, and now I know that there's a cause for what I'm feeling, and that is really powerful and kind of really lights a fire in my belly again. So I think it's the first time really since my NHS days that I'm like I've got that, yeah, I feel like I can make a difference, and maybe superhero complex, but like
No, but when you're passionate, I think, and also you're very, we'll go on to it in a minute with the Red S and stuff, but the scope of practice and the ability that you can have an impact on people, and understanding that sometimes some of the smallest things that somebody may say to you may be the biggest indicator. And I think if you haven't got passion. I think enthusiasm and passion is one of the most joyous emotions you can have, and it's very infectious. It's like laughing. Once you start, if you have a little giggler in the class, it's not long before even the grumpiest kid in the class is giggling as well, because that one person is really there. Not saying you're a little giggler, but that's sort of
I
that
am.
energy and that passion that comes through with it, which is incredible. If we just go into a little bit of light moments now, in your career up until now, what have some of the funniest moments been, or unexpected detours along the way do you think there's been for you?
Gosh. Well, I think even just detouring into running is hilarious because my dad, prior to his health kind of taking a bit of a shift, ran marathons. And I always joke he would have been a mammal. Like he would have done like Ironman and things like that. And I hated running. My housemates when I lived in London used to drag me to park run, and I used to just think it was the worst thing in the world. I just was like, why would anyone want to do this? It's awful. So I think my family just find it hilarious when I signed up for a running coach, they were like, "What are you doing?" And then I got back from traveling and, started finding this like love for trail because I've always loved hiking. I've hiked to Everest Base Camp, but I'd never thought about running it. And I was like, I signed up for a half marathon, and they were all just like, so I think that's been the kind of funniest shift is that I now specialize. Not only do I run myself, but I specialize in running. I think is, like I said, like the biggest curveball that I would have never, no one who knew me would ever have expected that to come out of my mouth. So,
But it's like, again, it's nice to be open-minded, I think.
mm.
And the quest for probably knowledge and understanding and impact has probably led you to here. If we fast forward to today then, and your work has become, as you said, very focused around health, performance, endurance with athletes. If we were at a dinner party and we just met, how would you describe Red S to me without trying to make me glaze over or lose understanding?
I guess it's a very complicated condition, but I guess the easiest way to explain it is when it's underpinned by something called low energy availability. So essentially what that means is when you are overtraining, under recovering and under fueling, your body can't cope with the demands of all of that. And it does this very annoying thing where it starts to shut down systems that it deems non-essential. Always will prioritize locomotion, so prioritizes movement. I always say it's like a think of like when we're cavemen, they didn't eat for weeks, but they still had to run away from a saber-toothed tiger. Like your body naturally will always put energy into that, so it'll always save your energy for running or exercise, but it will down regulate other things, which is everything, by the way.
Yeah,
Down regulates everything else.
but then I suppose in say football or rugby or hockey or something, or even netball, people might hear the old phrase of, what was it, 2% dehydration leads to 10% cognitive loss of function and stuff like that. I don't know how true that is, but this is on another level then with Red S. And what would be perhaps some of the, I know obviously we're not diagnosing or anything like that, but broad brushstrokes, if somebody's listening to this that does a lot of running or endurance sports, what would be some of the perhaps signs that they should start to listen to their body, or even speak to their coaches, or even parents might be needing to be aware of for their younger children, perhaps?
So I guess so like I said, it affects every system. So but the main ones that people will notice are kind of constant fatigue, lack of like performance. So people often will be like, I'm doing all this training, but I'm just not getting any better. Like that kind of thing, like a kind of sledgehammer to your performance. In terms of kind of slightly more like medical symptoms, like brain fog, like difficulty concentrating. And then it goes as far as like the big one in females is changes to or loss of your menstrual cycle. So either they start becoming really, really spaced out or really close together. And then for men, changes to or loss of morning erections or loss of libido, because essentially for both, it's your sex hormones are reducing. But like I said, there's loads. I suppose the slightly more scarier ones that people would be more concerned about is like heart palpitations and things like that. But like I said, it affects multi systems, but they're the most obvious ones that people pay attention to.
And is there a difference between, right, I've come off a series of, say, 2 weeks of peaking my training, now I feel tired? Obviously, sometimes we can think, well, I've had a busy week, I just feel tired. Is it then crossing over into everyday life that you may just lose a little bit of focus with some of your work or some of your friends or your family life? Is that sort of the bits where it's not just I'm losing brain fog when I'm running, it's actually affecting everyday life?
Yeah. So for like kids, it's, difficulty concentrating. Maybe their schoolwork's not doing as well. For, individuals at work, just, really struggling to sit down and concentrate, and like being a bit more snappy, like mood, like irritability, stuff like that. So and like I think that's the thing that's difficult with Red S. So, but I guess the big thing is, to diagnose Red S, you have to rule out other things, because there are lots of overarching other medical conditions that could be causing similar symptoms. So that's the biggie. But ultimately, yes, like obviously if you're training for a marathon, I mean, arguably that time at the end when you're in peak week and you're exhausted, you probably are in a little bit of low energy availability, because it is really hard to recover and fuel enough when you're training that much. But it's when it is constant, and we see it a lot where, it's a slight issue at the moment with the running space, or, well, to be fair, any sporting people that do any form of events, is just doing like back to back events, because you're just not recovering, and then they start to get into this cycle where they're like, I'm just not getting any better, my times are getting slower, I just feel sluggish, and that's when the kind of the like warning lights would start
And I
kind
suppose
of
they
popping
might
up.
even then have other sort of strains or strains in their body, other joint aches that may become that you think, oh, actually, is that because I'm training? Is it because of this? So dare I say, it's like a perfect cocktail, and it can
Yeah.
easily be over missed. And that's why, coming back to the fusion clinic, there's two heads looking at it from two different systems, from also I suppose, a nutritional input, and then also a physiological map,
Yeah,
bit of
and it's
psychology
and
as well.
no, exactly, and that is what is so important, I think, because I mean, yes, I guess another sign that I probably should mention as a physio, because I get so stuck on talking about the other ones because they're the ones people don't notice, is frequent injuries. Yeah, because your body's not healing, so we see lots of tendinopathies because your body just can't cope with the demand, and then the kind of worse injury is a stress fracture. So anyone who has a stress fracture, anyone who comes to me that has a stress fracture, I would be screening for REDS, because stress fractures are very, very different from a traumatic fracture, and your bone has had to become weaker to get a stress fracture, which happens because of low energy availability. So
And it's those, again, like you say, those small things that give you a little bit of an insight to go, right, you've now got this, let's explore down this rabbit warren, which is like, you, well, not rabbit warren, but down this avenue, because there could be some other things, rather than just going, oh, it's a stress fracture, blah, 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 and away you go. So it gives them that. And dare I say, if any people that do come to see physios or healthcare professionals, a lot of the sports people probably hate the thought of a rest day, and they feel guilty if they're not training. How could we help athletes understand recovery is actually part of the progress and not time lost?
yeah, I mean, I'm big on recovery, because I've actually started calling it adaptation, because I think we have this really negative connotation with rest. It's like laziness. Like if you have a day on the sofa, you're lazy.
Or practicing to be a pillow or something?
Exactly, exactly. Especially as like, we're kind of getting this constant messaging of we should be moving more, we should be doing your 10,000 steps a day, like blah, 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 which is, that was the target for the sedentary population. But unfortunately, the athletic population have kind of also picked up on that. And, so I always say to my athletes, like, this kind of misconception is, when you train, that's when you adapt. When you're like out running, you're making adaptations when you're running, and that's not true. You make the adaptations afterwards. So when you do your exercise, you cause trauma to your body. When you rest, your body heals from that, and that's how it gets stronger. If you are perpetually not resting, then your body just is not going to be able to meet the demands that you're placing on it, and that's when all these other things we've spoken about happen. So, and I think one of the biggest things, especially within the clients I see with Reds, is what people think of as rest is not rest. So I hate the term active recovery. Like, I absolutely despise it, because time and time again I see people being like, well, I just did a marathon and now I'm going to do some active recovery. It's not recovery. It's an easy run or an easy swim or an easy cycle, which has its place sometimes, but it's fundamentally, I think we need to change this opinion that recovery can be active, because it can't.
Yeah. I suppose it's a hybrid of words that it sounds really professional. It sounds like we're doing something. And that was going to be my question is there a rule of thumb? If you've run a marathon, you've potentially had a 16-week run up to it, a rest day may actually be more than a day because you might have to travel back from somewhere which have all of those factors in. So actually, I think that misconception of active recovery is an artfully vague word because it sounds like you're doing something and it buzzes everybody up. But actually, if we go down into the specifics of it, it's you need a rest day, which classes as this, or rest days. Are there any other myths or annoyances like active recovery that drive you wild, or you hear quite a lot of, that people almost use it as just active recovery, and they're actually got an addiction to doing something? No, yeah, we're doing that, it's okay. Do you have any of those pet hates?
Gosh, I have so many pet peeves. I think one of the ones that I speak about a lot is around like muscle tightness and stretching and mobility. And, I want to put it out there. I am not anti stretching and mobility at all. It's really important. It holds its place, but option of muscular tightness as we know it from science comes from when a muscle is being worked above its capacity. So, one of the things that I've stolen this from a colleague because I think it's excellent, but one of the ways that I explain it to people is if you imagine a tent, when it's not windy, you don't need the guide ropes. It's not being tested, it can stay up on its own. When you're in a storm, those guide ropes need to go in and they need to hold and that's essentially what happens when your body's not coping with the demands of it. Those muscles are having to work really hard to maintain and meet the demands of it. And that's where that perception of tightness comes from. I get people all the time, as I'm sure you do, that come who are like, I feel really tight, but I've been stretching so much and it's not any better. And I'm like, yeah, because you need to get it stronger.
Exactly. And again, that's in having perhaps I've had a quick scroll. These are the trending stretches that I think I have this ailment. I think I'm doing active recovery because I need to. And it's that spiral away from, I suppose, a athlete-centered approach, more to I've just got to be a busy fool type of thing. And for listeners that are training hard right now, what's one practical thing they could do perhaps this week or next week that might keep themselves a little bit healthier whilst they're trying to chase their performance?
So I guess it goes back to the recovery and rest days. So I always want individuals having a minimum of one rest day. And when I say rest day, I mean, you know, in an ideal, unless you're someone who has a sedentary job, ideally it's not a day when you're at work. So if you're sedentary, fine. But like us, we're on our feet all day. So for us, a rest day can't really be a work day because we're active. So I really want people to have at least one day a week where they really don't exercise. And by that, I mean, you don't walk, you don't go out, you don't hit your 10,000 steps a day marker and things like that. Like I've started working with the Oxford rowing team and I said to the guys, I'm telling you to go in lifts, like try and get your exercise down so your body just has that day to recover. So I would say that's one of the biggies. I mean, nutrition is a whole other topic, but I think one of the major things that I always say is when you finish a marathon or a half or whatever endurance event, start getting your head around the fact that you need to take time off running. So if it's a marathon or an ultra, I say like 2 weeks. And normally the first week is no exercise. Like you can do a bit of a walk or a stretch, but I don't want people swimming or cycling or anything. And knowing that that's good for you, like that's a good thing. That's not a sign of laziness. That's that's what your body needs. So it's kind of changing that perception. So just take rest.
Just take rest, but not active
Yeah.
rest. Rest.
No, good. Watch Netflix. Have a day watching Netflix, eating carbs.
Brilliant. And we've gone from your neuroscience labs to running tracks, from NHS wards, red clinics, so we're now going to sort of just pull back and do a little bit of reflection. What's one of the lessons that you've sort of carried with you is sort of, by the sounds of it, by staying open-minded and perhaps being brave enough to saying yes to things that work. Can you take us back to some of those moments where being open-minded has really helped you gain some knowledge, help some athletes, or even just help your personal career?
Yeah, I think especially with my job, like, we as medical professionals, you have to be evidence-based. And I think being open-minded is part of that and not being afraid to be like, oh, some new research has come out and I got that wrong. Or not I got that wrong, but now I'm going to change, because I think a lot of people can get very stagnant in their knowledge, or are afraid to turn around to someone and be like, actually, that's changed now. We now believe X. So I think fundamentally, because of how much my career has changed, I've had to be so open minded about things and learning new things, and like working with individuals with Reds is not how I would work with a normal, athlete who came in who wasn't struggling with that. So I think that's really, really important. And I guess just being brave and saying yes has really served me well. It can be really hard, especially like moving from employment to being self-employed. I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm putting all this pressure on me and my partner. I'm not going to be earning money. Like, what am I doing? Like, and it is scary. Like, it's really scary. And especially as, I'm sure you experience it when you're self-employed, like to start with, you have to build up your client base, and you have those months where you don't earn much money. But I have I take pride in myself for, like, being brave and, like, pushing myself, and it has served me really well, because it just means now, like, I had a friend, visiting yesterday, and I was saying to her, it's like, recently I've been really reflecting on kind of my career, and I'm like, I get to pave my own path, which I just think is really awesome. Like, I found this passion in Reds, and I'm a really stubborn person, so it probably helps, because I'm like, I need to sort this out. And I think just being that, like, advocating for yourself, and like, if there's something you're passionate about, take the risk. Like, I know it sounds cliche, but you will figure it out, and you might have to do it in a slightly less risky way than I did it. But no, I think that's been one of my biggest learning curves, is like every time I've taken a risk, I've been like, "Oh my God, I've made the worst decision ever." And then I realized it was the best decision ever.
Is it a bit like monkey bars? You're really happy with this one monkey bar, you understand it where you are, and then you can either swing, but you can't hold two handles at the same time. You have to let go of one in order to do the other. But also, I would say ego. You've left the ego at the door, and there's no identity, where you've sort of meandered through and weaved through. You've been humble enough, open enough to actually say, this concept, okay, this is brilliant, but this one also seems a little bit better, and I'll go with that. Whereas, unfortunately, in life, there is a lot of ego and a lot of identity. I have to identify as this, and this is how again, I'm a runner. I have to have active recovery. I have to do 10 hours a week of foam rollering. I have to identify as this. I have to have tape on me to run faster. It's got to be really bright. All of these things. I must have these shoes. They're all an identity, but we strip them back. Running is just one foot in front of the other. You're listening to your patients, your athletes. It's just one question and then the next. And here's the knowledge I can get from you. Looking back, what do you think has been the most surprising thing running has changed for you, either personally or professionally, other than the fact you now love it and you hated it?
Oh gosh, I guess there's a couple of things. I think, I'm 33. I'm in my early 30s, mid 30s. I don't know how you want to put it, but I think it was it made me meet a whole bunch of amazing people I never would have met otherwise. And I think the trail running space is a really special space, and there's lots of special people. My friends will laugh at me because of that, but I think it's just taught me that there's more to sport than being competitive, because like I said, with my netball and my swimming, it was like, can I get a PB? Can I get to nationals? Can I do X, Y, and Z? Whereas with trail running, I just don't care. Like, I just want to be able to get out in the mountains, or, go somewhere beautiful, just enjoy movement for what it is, and be grateful that I am in a body that allows me to move. I could not give 'em monkeys what time I get, because that part of me is it's just gone. I have no interest in doing. I did one road half marathon for Big Moose, and I'm glad I did it, but I hated every moment. And I was like, because there was that pressure of time, and I was like, I've moved past this in my life. So I think running has really taught me that there's more to exercise than you can still push your limits. Like, I never thought I'd be able to run an ultra marathon ever. Like I said, I've gone from hating running, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I did an ultra. But it wasn't to get a set time. It was just I just had a great day in Madeira in the mountains with my friends. And I never thought sport could be like that. So I think that's really special.
How long did it take you to take off your ultra marathon medal when you completed it?
Oh my gosh, there was actually a guy who the next day at breakfast was wearing his. I like I said, I like to say I don't have an ego, so mine is hung up in my bedroom, and it is a very, very proud. Any medal I get from running, I'm so proud of, because I'm just like, it's really cool that. And my biggest thing is anyone, like, I think that's what's special about running is, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are huge barriers to entry for so many people still in the running space, but as a sport, it's most accessible sport for anyone. You don't need flashy trainers, you can people run barefoot. Yeah, and I think that's because no other sport is like that, so I think that's really cool.
And like you say, when you said when you went and found, was it Louis?
Mhm.
And you
Lewis?
Lewis, that's it. Went in and it was all camping and you were out of half a shed, that was an experience that perhaps if you went to nationals at netball, it would be a lovely clean clinic room, lots of squeaky floors, hot chocolate, coffee, snacks and stuff, but you're out in the wilderness having another life experience that you can share, and you go, these essentially are random special people, but we're doing a random special thing together.
Yeah, and I see the grossest feet ever now, like, I always joke, like, when I get people that come into my clinic room and they're like, "Oh," if I see a lot of obviously feet and ankles given what I specialize in, and they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry I've not painted my toenails," and I'm like, working at ultramarathons, like, one of my closest friends, she won't mind me naming and shaming her, Louise, really struggles with blisters, and last year at Why We Run, I individually taped every single one of her toes every day, and they were disgusting, but we got through. And do you know what I mean? You like trail running, you just have to like leave your ego at the door. It's you just everyone gets stuck in. You're muddy. No one cares what you look like. It's a great place to be. And yeah, compared to gosh, couldn't think of anything. I stopped playing netball because I was like I can't break my fingers anymore with my job. Like David Beckham.
Yeah. And looking ahead, what's next for you, whether that's in work or your athletes personally, what's really exciting you right now?
I think the kind of like where I want to go with Reds, and like that is really, it's such a problem in in all sports at the moment because of this, skinny is better, so people, under fuel to get lighter to perform better. And so the biggest thing that I want to do, like I said, is raising the profile of Reds, so in schools, in the NHS, in because that's the other thing is loads of people don't know about it, so that's a really big passion. And like I said, like improving physio management of it, because we're often, or therapy, I say physio, sports therapists, chiros, whoever's, because we're often the people, that first line of contact when some, especially for athletic people, they'll often go to a physio rather than their GP, or a sports therapist rather than their GP. So I want to help improve that so we can start helping people earlier, because we tend, in my clinic with Rini, we tend to see people who are in a really bad way because they're, a year or two or more into things, or 10 years, or so I really, it's something that if you catch it early, your recovery is worlds away.
And from the snapshots that you've already said, it's quite not a silent killer, but it slowly traps you before you realize. And it's almost like a finger trap. You can't actually get out unless you have the right technique or the right understanding, and you might like get armed off things. So having that better knowledge and sharing it with people.
Yeah, knowledge is power.
Sophie, thank you very much for sharing the highs, the lows, and everything in between. It's a reminder that careers are not straight lines, and sometimes the bravest thing you can say is yes, or simply just take a rest day. It's been a pleasure talking to you today. And if the listeners are inspired or might have a few questions that's resonated with them, where can they find some help, or where can they get in touch with you?
Best thing is probably through my Instagram, which is at Run Free Rehab. Yeah, just drop me a message.
And I'll pop that in the show notes, but thank you very much again, Sophie. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.